What is freedom of speech and when has it gone too far? Let's talk about it. I'm just saying what I think. I have a right to free speech. These are, if you pardon my bad accent, these are phrases that people often repeat and say when confronted about the impact of some of the words they have said. Now, I want to be fair in saying that this space of what is free speech, what is hate speech, is a complex area in the UK. Free speech means the right to seek, receive, and share information and ideas with other people. But this freedom must be used responsibly and can be restricted when considered grossly offensive or as threatening or encouraging hateful activity. Hate speech, particularly online, often describes the person on the other side as the other, right? And when I say the other, I mean the other on the other side of the author making the statements. Hate speech perpetrators often use the other as a scapegoat for all of society's problems or the sole cause of society's problems. Let's take a look at some of the differences here.
The boundary between hate speech and freedom of speech is not always simple to identify. According to a 2018 report by the OSCE, international law protects the right to freedom of expression. Everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing, or in print, in the form of art or through any other media of his choice.
In other words, we have a right to disagree with each other, and that right is crucial in a liberal democracy. In fact, our whole parliament system is built on people going back and forth, arguing different positions, making jokes, and just generally really, debating ideas. That's how we push things forward. That's needed. We need more of that, not less of it. But as we said earlier, sometimes free speech can become hate speech, and we have to navigate that balance delicately. As we said earlier, freedom of speech is the right to seek, receive, impart information and ideas of all kinds by any means. In a liberal, robust democracy, that is important because debate and discussions and free thought are right in the center of any real democracy.
My passionate belief that the second most precious thing in life is the right to express yourself freely. The most precious thing in life, I think, is food in your mouth. And the third most precious is a roof over your head. But a fixture for me in the number 2 slot is free expression, just below the need to sustain life itself. That is because I have enjoyed free expression in this country all my professional life and fully expect to continue to do so.
But should this freedom of expression sometimes be curtailed and limited? In other words, when can free speech be limited? Well, you may not expect me to say this. I'm a lover of free speech, but even I believe that there are some times that free speech should be limited and should be curtailed. Governments, I believe, have an obligation and in fact a duty to prohibit hate speech and to stop essentially incitement to violence. And I think any restrictions they want to make on free speech can be made so long as they can justify it on the grounds that it protects specific cohorts of the public or the public interest at large, that it may ruin the reputation of other people. And I think if there are going to be restrictions to freedom of expression or freedom of speech, they must be laid out very clearly. It must be true and clear and in a language that everyone can understand, so everyone knows the rules we're playing at. I also think it's fair to ask that the government or employers or anyone who's attempting to curtail freedom of speech makes a case and has to demonstrate essentially as to why they need them and why they feel it's appropriate. All of this must be backed up by safeguards if people fail to meet the restrictions, but also a process of appeal so that if people have a problem, they can appeal and their case can be properly heard. Let's take a look at a case study that seems to make the point about this delicate balance, how we must protect freedom of speech, but also be very intentional in legislating against hate speech.
It's momentous for the gay community in Switzerland. The public has voted by a big margin in favour of making it illegal to publicly discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation.
Today's an important day, not only because we voted yes, but it was a clear yes, which shows that Switzerland really stands behind gays, lesbians and bisexuals.
In 2018, Switzerland's parliament voted to expand anti-discrimination law to include sexual orientation. Inciting hatred or denigrating someone for being gay, lesbian or bisexual would be punishable by up to 3 years in prison. Opponents insisted this violated freedom of speech and argued that Swiss law had already got sufficient protections.
Now, on Sunday, the referendum was held, and 63.1% of the public voted in favour of the new law. Now, the opposition campaigners who had just lost the referendum sought to frame it as a gagging law that infringed on their rights of free speech. But as we've said before, it meets all our stipulations. This is the majority that agreed with this, and it's really there to protect the minorities. Under the new legislation, those who publicly degrade or discriminate against others on the basis of their sexual orientation could face a jail sentence of up to 3 years. Although the law doesn't speak or cover private conversations, it's very clear about what's expected publicly. Now, it's very difficult and it's a very delicate balance, but you see here an attempt to consult the majority of people. There's a clear appeals process, but there are repercussions for targeting a minority group of people. Now, in the UK, things are quite similar because under Article 10 in the Human Rights Act of 1998, everyone has the right to freedom of expression in the UK, but the law states that this freedom may be subject to formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society. And so, herein is the problem, but also the opportunity. It is very important to protect people's rights to speak freely. That's a right as innate as being human itself. We love expressing ourselves, and that should never be curtailed. But it's true too that some minority groups and some groups have historically suffered at the hands of other people's right to free speech. And so we have to be careful in realizing that actually protecting some people's rights to free speech can only happen if there's legislation against hate speech, namely incitement to violence. It's very hard to argue that everyone deserves free speech if you're inciting somebody to physically harm somebody else, thereby taking away, in the case that they die, their right to free speech. There's a delicate balance to strike, and there are times where free speech becomes hate speech, and folks have to be respectful of that in a democratic society, especially when most of the people agree with the new law. That's what happened in Switzerland, and cases like that are commonplace around Europe. Free speech is important, but only as important as protecting people from hate speech. Thank you for watching that episode of Let's Talk About It. I hope you found it insightful and interesting. If you did, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to turn your notification bell on so that you know when a new episode is live.